Welcome to the Channel Champions podcast, powered by Evolve IP, hosted by Zach Anderson. Today, we'll explore the always evolving landscape of the IT, telephony, and communications channel. If you are a trusted advisor, strategist, IT consultant, or sales engineer, this one's for you. Today's guest is...
All right. This is the Channel Champions podcast, episode 003. I have Richard Rodriguez here from ClearSync. I am going to let you go and introduce yourself, and then we're going to get after it. And I'm really excited to have you here. So, Richard, take it away.
Yeah, appreciate the invite. So Richard Rodriguez, founder, CEO of ClearSync Solutions. People may have known us previously as BITS. We just went through a rebrand of the company. I'm not like a typical channel partner. I did not come from the telecom industry. I was 24 years oil and gas and private equity. And I always had this. I was on the other side of the table, obviously buying technology and doing a lot of large deals. And I always had it. I just always saw that, the potential for starting up this company and approaching it from a different perspective than kind of historically when I had worked with other channel partners that were very focused and specific on one thing, whether it was UCaaS or network or SD-WAN or security. So we have a little bit of a different approach and started this company 2020.
Wow.
Mid 2020. And the whole reason for the rebrand was because of my background in oil and gas. BIT stood for Business Intelligence Technology Services. I thought it was great.
Right.
But all the people in my network thought I was selling drill bits. And I just couldn't get them over that hump. So finally I just gave up. I'm like, all right, we're just going to come up with a different name. So.
That's funny. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Okay. I'm always interested to know, of all the technology advisor companies, I always wonder how you come up with the name, because there's so many creative names out there, right? And you would think BITS, it makes sense, right? But then, it's funny that you say, I had no idea that people would be coming to you for drill bits and stuff like that. But how do you come up with something like a ClearSync, for example?
So I actually, there's a team. I office out of a shared office with a friend of mine, and he's got a marketing company. I've known him for a long time. He's got a steel distribution company. He has a lot of different things. And so, I'd been in the office for about a year. And when it was time to, when I finally just gave up, and he was on me about it a lot. He's like, man, you really need to do something about the name, and it's just confusing. And so finally I said, all right, let's put your team on this and walk me through this, because I am not a creative person at all when it comes to that stuff.
Sure.
And so we went through an entire process of, it was very immersive, and it opened my eyes to a lot of things too, because you just get so deep in the day to day and building a business and running a business, and to be able to step back and look at the bigger picture of what I want the business to be, where I want it to go, all these things. And, they helped me kind of, I had my vision, and I've always had that, but to be able to put it into a framework and words, it was really good. And then that's where they're the ones that really, I don't know, we came up with a list of, there were probably 40 different names.
Oh, geez.
And then we kind of whittled it down. And I was like, okay, well, this worked. Does this work? And we had different themes.
Yeah, sure.
Because one of the things that I say is, for us, since I've been on the other side of the table, and I bought solutions for, for companies that I started or that I've worked for, and there's a lot of my competitors who haven't been on that side of it, right? And so, I'm sure you've been in those conversations where, tech people and business people, they find it very hard to communicate with each other, right? They all want the same thing, and they may even want the same solution. They just don't even know they want the same solution. So you have tech people who are who are very technical, and they're talking about, why the company needs this and all this stuff. And then you've got the business people who are like, well, how does it affect my business? And, oh, you're going to make it that much harder because now I have to sign into this and I have to go to this. And,
right.
At the end of the day, they're after the same thing. They just don't know how to communicate. So I always said, like, we're the bridge that can speak to the technical people, but they can put it into a business case and talk to the business stakeholders and say, this is why it's going to help your business, right? Whether it's a technology that helps you retain customers or grow your customers, or it helps your products, or it, makes you more responsive in the field, whatever the case may be, right? Mm-hmm. But we're able to present that way. So we spend a lot of time in that bridge. And if you look at the ClearSync logo, it's a synapse, right? So it's that bridge. Yeah. So right. That's how we finally came up with that. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So what was it like? I mean, obviously being in oil and gas for, you said 20 years, right? And then now 2020 happens. So you were obviously already sort of transitioning, like, 2018, 2019 into looking into doing that? Or like, when did it enter your mind that, like, I want to make this transition? And then, like, what was it like, 2020? Obviously we know what happened, but, like, what was that like?
It was interesting because I had it in my head that, I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. And so sure. The last company I started, it was myself and 4 other founders. And then we had a private equity company back us for a pretty significant amount of money. I think it was $325 million was the initial investment.
Wow.
And then, other investors come on. And so we bought 9 companies in the span of probably 26 months, and then had to put it all together. So again, like right there, right, you're buying all these companies, and it was global. So we had facilities. We had facilities in Dubai, Canada, all over the U.S. We had sales offices all over the world. So again, you can figure everything from network aggregation, cybersecurity. Everything that we do in the channel fits into that, right?
Right.
And again, a lot of times as I was going through those years, that we started in 2015, I left there at the end of 2019, like literally like a month and a half, like a month before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
And I had these plans. I was going to start a different oil field services company, and pandemic hits. And I was like, well, you know what? This is the right time to start this, like, because all the funding for oil and gas pretty much dried up. And so I was like, you know what? This is the time to do it. And I had a path forward. I knew I could do it. I had the runway for it. I said, okay, it's going to be now or never. So might as well do it now.
Wow. Talk about turning lemons into lemonade, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And again, that was what really kind of crystallized the idea for me, because in dealing with everything I had to go through with that other company, it was like, initially, it was like, yeah, there are channel partners who really focus on network. And it was like, okay, I would talk to them about aggregation, and we would go down that road and the SD-WAN road. And it's like, hey, like, I really want cybersecurity. And I'm like, well, I don't really, I can give you somebody, but that's not really what I focus on. And it's like, okay, so, before I knew it, I was dealing with 4 different partners trying to do different services. And I thought, it would be so much better if I could just deal with one partner that had enough knowledge and could speak to all these different things, right? And talk to them again at a business case. So if you look at what we do, especially with the network and the connections that we built, it's very C-suite type people that are in our network. So instead of trying to go from kind of IT manager, director, VP, and sell up, we go for the C-suite, and we explain the technology, because they're extremely smart people. They run billion-dollar companies, but they're also the same guys who are calling IT saying, like, hey, what's my password? How do I log into this? Right? They're just not
right.
And so, if you're trying to explain it in a technical way, it's over their head. But if you can explain it to them in a business case and how it's going to affect their bottom line and what it's going to do for their customer experience or employee experience, they buy into it really quick. And then at that point, it's much easier, because now I don't want to say they're pushing it down, but at least it's a conversation where the tech people then know like, hey, they're already on board. And so I don't have to go through that hard process of trying to sell it up and then trying to sell it to my executives and then sell it to a board. I've already got the CFO and the CEO on board. So let's make this happen. Right. And it's more just, and we've had those experiences where, IT, VP of IT directors, they feel threatened by it and they're like, oh, like, who's this guy coming in? It's like, no, like, I'm trying to help you, right? Like, these are solutions that you're pitching anyway, so just use me as a resource and use me as somebody as basically an extension of your team rather than trying to, so I think once we get over that initial hurdle, then they're on board and it's a pretty quick win.
So knowing that, sort of like C-level folks are maybe not as tech savvy, when do you bring in the, technical products and features into the conversation? Like how do you sort of feel them out to, see when's a good time to start? Because it can be a lot. I mean, depending on the solution, like there's a lot of technical.
Sure. I mean, it's more so,
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's more so understanding, because, any CEO or CFO or CIO, I mean, they've got their vision of, they know where their company needs to go in the next 3 to 5 years, right? They've got that overall strategy in their head. And the whole thing is like, how do they get there? Right. So if it's, if they're trying to, let's just say it's a business and their current customer retention is, in the 70 percentile and they know they want to get it up to 85, 90. It's like, well, how do you do that? If it's more of a call center type business, let's look at things like wait times. Let's look at things like customer satisfaction survey. And a lot of them, maybe they don't have the technology. They haven't invested in it previously where they can't even see those kinds of numbers. So if you tell the CEO, well, if you do it this way, and if I could help to get your retention into that 85, 90th percentile, that translates into X dollars, right? And these are already existing customers. Now you can focus on upselling those customers. You're not having to go, chase new customers per se. I mean, that's where it clicks for them as an example. And they're like, yeah, that's something that I really want, right? And usually at that point, when you do get in front of the IT director, VP, they're like, yeah, like that's exactly what we've been talking about is trying to implement those kinds of things, whether it's, being able to use the omni-channel stuff, whether it's being able to use customer surveys, AI, all those things that layer on top of, traditional contact center. Then it's an easier sell for them because now they're speaking the same language. So now it shifts to the technical side of it. So now you're communicating with the IT guys saying, okay, let's find the right solution that goes with your existing tech stack, right? What's going to fit in? What's going to be, what can scale up with you? So now you can tackle the tech side of it, but then the business side is already bought into it.
Right. Yeah, that's something that we've talked about a lot too. Like I like that you brought that up, the extension of your IT team, because and in addition to that, like how can an organization or a solution like turn your IT staff, for example, into more of like a profit center than a cost center? We talk about that a lot too. And like,
right.
And like you said, it can be threatening to an IT leader when you come in and say like, we're going to help you do more with less. Right. But I don't think we do a good job of like defining what that means. Like that doesn't mean we're going to like, you can now, like if you're talking to a CFO, like, oh, I can now cut half my IT staff. Like, no, that's not what we're saying. It's like, we're basically going to take some of the keeping the lights on work off of them. So now you can sell the whole, like, what do you really want your IT team to be focusing on? Like what strategic sort of like initiatives do you really want them working on? And then you sort of like, work backwards from there. Does that make, or is that kind of how you have that conversation?
It does because, most IT leaders, they get frustrated because, and even their employees get frustrated because they're dealing with low-level problems. They're dealing with a lot of low-level problems. And it's like, okay, if we can do something to take that off your plate and make make the work more interesting for your people. One, you're going to have better retention, right? Because now they have an interesting job, and it's not just answering, boring help tickets. It's actually helping the business, and they get more involved in it. They get to understand the business more. And then you have people like marketing and salespeople that now see IT as a resource rather than kind of a hindrance, right?
Right.
And so it transitions them from being, again, just the guy of like, oh, reset my password to, hey, like, how can you help me create a dashboard that will show me this? How can you help me look at these things that will make the whole company propel forward and make us all look good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, it's such an interesting conversation, and it's interesting too that you're, having success and having those conversations with C-levels, and that's just really cool. So as far as ClearSync goes, so do you, are you sort of regionally focused, or, I mean, I know you're a pretty new company, obviously, but like, what do you, what's your sort of market size right now? Is it sort of where you're at right now?
Geography wise, I mean, we've got clients that are global. We do have enterprise clients that are all over the world. So, and then we do have, smaller companies, service companies, for example, in oil and gas that are US based. But again, they're, when we work on IoT projects, for example, their tools go out all around the world, right? So it's how do we keep track of that? How do we pull all that data in? How do we put it on dashboards that not only help them, but they also help their customers as well. So, especially again, I talk a lot about oil and gas because that's my background. That's a lot of our customers. I mean, we do have some retail, we do have some healthcare, we've got some financial services as well, but oil and gas is the bulk of what our customer base is right now. And so, when you look at them, it's a very, capital intensive business as far as tools, right? And anytime you're producing whether you're drilling, drilling new paths, whether you're already producing oil and gas, and every day that you're down, it's very, very expensive. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a day if these operations go down. So anything we can do to keep those up and keep them going and help them predict maintenance and be able to schedule downtime and anything like that, it's a huge difference maker to them. So like on the IoT side, that's what we focus on. The data side, that's what we focus on. And then again, changing their mindset too. Like, for example, they think of, they hear contact center and they're like, well, I don't have a contact center. It's like, well, no, you do. It's like you have very large inside sales organizations that basically are contact centers. They're dealing with your outside salespeople. They're dealing with your customers who are calling in every day. And it's like, hey, where's my order? It's like, this is contact center technology that can tie into your ERP. And you explain, when you go down that road and explain the whole thing, they're like, oh, wow, this is game changing. It's like, exactly. So it's just getting over some of that historic terminology and putting it into terms that they can understand.
Right. And of course, if we're going to talk about contact center, we would be remiss if we didn't bring up CX and UX and all the X's, right? Like how has that become such a center for conversation? Like what are your thoughts on that? How did that even start?
I mean, I think the pandemic had a lot to do with it, right? Because all of a sudden people had to work remote. And that sped up the process. I mean, I really think that sped up the process by at least 5 to 7 years. And a lot of the digital transformations and the communication transformations that people would have gotten there eventually. But I think that really expedited that, one. And I think two, because of that, you had the industry that looked at it and saw this buy-in from all these companies. And that's when they started to, and then you saw a lot of them really have to start setting themselves apart. I mean, when you look at whether it's UCaaS, CCaaS, I mean, there are a lot of players out there, right? And I think there is going to be a lot of consolidation that's going to have to come down. And I think you've already started to see that, but I think that's ongoing. And I think And everybody's after this, this one pane of glass. Everybody wants to be the one pane of glass for whether it's, call center agents or whatever the case may be. And I think that's where people try to start to set themselves apart. And that's where this, CX came in and XCAS came in and all these other things for, branding the experience rather than just the communications portion of it, because it is so much more than communications, right?
Mm. So how are you having that how are you having that conversation with, a C-level, since that's kind of like your strategy? So like, how are you selling that to them?
I think, it's a case by case basis, because you have, again, and I think it's dominated by industry, right? Again, if you're dealing with somebody that historically has dealt in contact center, talking to them and using and explaining it more in an XCAS way and framing it into elevating that customer experience, they're already kind of in that world. So they understand that, and they understand that this is part of the evolution, and they're ready to take that next step. If you're talking to an industry that's not historically in, contact center, and they're more, more traditional kind of UCAS, I kind of stay away from the new acronyms, and I just kind of keep it basic for them. And it's like, okay, let's just talk about, we're using the same thing, just not using those terms, right? And just more talking about, let's have your evolution, but let's have it in more of a business sense rather than a customer experience sense. So I think it just depends which vertical you're in.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I'd like to dig into that a little bit as far as the verticals goes. Like, is there, with everything that we talk about in the channel, like, are there specific verticals that you've seen that care more about, CX versus, UX, or like, I mean, of all the things that, like I said, we talk about, like, how does that translate to like a specific vertical?
I mean, one that comes to mind is healthcare, right? Like, I mean, it's one that everybody can relate to. It's a pretty frustrating vertical as a customer, right? When you're calling in to make an appointment, when you're still dealing with getting to a doctor, and if they're not very efficient in what they're doing, you got an hour wait in the waiting room, and trying to get your records and trying to get to the like all those things tie into more of a CX customer experience. And that's where it's taking their traditional, like, yes, you've got, you may have had an on-prem thing, and yeah, you may have even transitioned to a cloud contact center platform, but you're not utilizing everything else that's out there that can make your customer experience even better. And again, make those people want to stay with you, right? Because you've seen a lot of consolidation in other industries such as healthcare. So you've got these big hospital systems, and, again, having them all be able to talk to each other, be able to share each other, because within those big systems, you've got general practitioners, and you've got all kinds of specialists that are in there. But if they can't even communicate within that, and then being able to show them that they already have the tools to do that, and there's tools out there that can make it better. So when a customer does call in and it's pulling up all their records, and the person who answers is like, oh yeah, I see that you had an appointment on this day, and they're now referring you to this orthopedist or this person or that person. I've got you. I can get you in on this day. This is exactly what you need. They'll already have your records when you get there. So you're not having to worry about, you get there and it's like, oh, tell me about your whole history again. Like, it's already there, right? Or if you call in and you need a prescription refilled, or you need a follow-up or something, being able to have all of that pulled up so that person answering the phone can really help you, rather than like, oh, well, let me put you on hold. Let me transfer you to so-and-so. I got to, we've all been there, right?
Mm-hmm. So what other like solutions have you seen that aid in or not aid, but like contribute to the CX conversation besides CCAS, for example?
I mean, customer experience can go to all kinds of things, right? Like in retail, we're seeing we're doing a lot on, AI has been a big thing for retail as far as, people have, and it's evolving so fast, but even take something like a store that brings in new products, right? It's always reactive. So if they bring in a new product, they've got to wait, 3 and 6 months to see like, hey, has this really taken off? Is this selling like I thought it would sell? This investment, whether it's a new product or whether it's a new placement in a store or those kinds of things. And being able to layer AI on top of their cameras, for example, so that you can see, okay, like this is really driving, like a person spends X amount of time on this new display or on this new product, or being able to see in real time, like how much of it is actually selling. You can make better decisions on your investment rather than, or do it as a test pilot in the store and be able to see like, okay, we do think this is going to take off, rather than you think it will, and then you roll it out for a bunch of stores and it's like, oh, that one didn't work out so well. But you don't find that out until 3, 6, 9 months later. And that could have been a bad investment. So again, it's helping them in those kinds of ways to be able to make better decisions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big topic is AI and how far that's come just in the last couple of years. But I'm also hearing about security, being more a part, being a bigger conversation today. But you would think like security should always be important. Like, why is it just now just from what we're seeing, like, why is it just now that security is such a hot topic?
I think 2 reasons or 3 reasons. I think one has been the, just the publicity that people have seen, about whether it's ransomware or things like that can affect a business and shut down a business. One, there's obviously the monetary cost that comes immediately with having to deal with that. 2, it's a lot of the disaster recovery. Even if you get it back, you really don't fully get it back. And do you have things in place? I think 3, the insurance industry is also driving that as well, because people jumped on cyber insurance and it was another way for that industry to make money. But now it's like, oh, they're having to pay some big sums because the number of incidents that are happening, right? So now you see premiums going up, and now people are saying like, hey, I want to bring my premium down. How can I do that? And it's like, okay, well, let's run through an assessment. And if you've only got, these 2 things instead of these 12 things, like this can really bring your premium down, right? So I think it's that. I think it's that too. I think it's also the adoption of things, like even take something like ChatGPT, right? I talk to my clients about that all the time, because it's like you have to put guardrails around that, because, when people are putting things into ChatGPT now, whether it's, and I've seen it on a bunch of clients where people are putting in like, hey, summarize this meeting notes for me because I need to put this in a presentation. It's great. It spits it out for you in less than a minute. But, within those meeting notes, you've got customer data, you may have proprietary, information in there, and that's all gone now. That is now in OpenAI, right? And, if something happens there, like your company data and your strategies are out there, like all kinds of things are out there. So it's really important on those kinds of things that, yes, people have access to this and it's a great tool, but you really have to put guardrails around how employees use that, right?
How do you secure? I mean, so how would you even go about securing ChatGPT? I mean, if you say, for example, like when, you can use this tool, but don't put meeting notes in there, like, is there something that you can, like, is there a solution that's out there that puts those guardrails in place, or how does that work?
I mean, I think the most extreme guardrail is you can't use it.
Right.
If you want to go that far, but I think at least giving them guidelines to say like, hey, like these are things you can use it for, right? Like if you're coming up with a sales presentation or something, as long as there's not, and again, putting things around there, like you're not putting proprietary strategies in there. You're not putting things that are, IP protected, that you would, And again, I think a lot of it too is just some common sense, right? Like you wouldn't go to Joe Blow down the street and give him your source code for something if you're a programmer, right? But
Right.
but we've seen instances where people do that, right? Because it can code and it can do these things. And so I think it's just putting those guardrails in to say like, hey, these are things that you're allowed to go at it for, and these are things that you aren't, and just trying to limit that, right?
Right.
Because again, when you leave it wide open to people, it's just it can get out of control really quickly.
So when you're talking about this type of stuff with C-levels, do you see, what are some of the things that, as far as a priority or a driver goes for each of them, like for example, between like a CISO, CFO, CTO, that sort of like how, when you're trying to say like, let's, here is this solution, how do you conflate those things or those drivers with the solution? Like, what do they care about, and like, how do they come to some sort of common ground that this is the direction that we should go?
Yeah. Again, I think it's, from a business standpoint, again, it's understanding where they're at, where they want to go. They all have, they all have their roadmaps for their business on how they want to get there, whether that's new products or upselling current things or things like that. So I think one is getting a complete understanding of their business. Two, from a technical side, is understanding, their entire tech stack. What are you currently dealing with now? Because the one thing that you don't want to do is put in a solution that, doesn't sync up with everything.
Sure.
Because then you look like you don't know what you're talking about, and it just derails the whole process at that point. So it's really those two things, and getting an understanding from the tech side of it about everything that they've got currently, understanding from the business where they're at, and then again, it's the other thing too at the very beginning is, and I'm sure you've been through this, is understanding who the stakeholders are and who the real decision makers are, because I'm sure you've been in situations where, you've been working on something for, 2 or 3 months. You think you're at the goal line, and then you're at that meeting where you think a contract is going to get signed. And then all of a sudden 3 other people walk in, and it's like, who are these people? It's like, oh, this is so-and-so from marketing. He's got to sign off on it too. And he hasn't been involved for 3 months. And it's like,
oh, geez.
Okay, now we got to start this again. Right. So really, really understanding that from the very beginning, and understanding how each portion of it hits a different part of the business, right? Because, and again, that just varies from company to company. You've got some people where, you may have an IT budget, but, part of that actually flows up to the marketing budget or the sales budget, right? Because, right. And again, seeing different things, right? Like, manufacturing businesses, for example, I've seen it a lot of times where you're trying to sell. So even something like security, whether it's even something like physical security, right? Mm-hmm. If they want to, consolidate everything and get to one vendor and get to one, camera brand or whatever, you'll talk to them and they're like, yeah, this is what we want to do. But then, you get into it and it's like, well, each plant manager has the autonomy because that's their budget, right? So now that's a whole different way of trying to sell this, rather than if you were trying to sell it to, a CISO or a CTO or a CFO, right?
Yeah. So tell me about, I want to hear a war story here. So tell me about a time where, just like you were talking about, you're working on an opportunity or a deal for months, and then you get to the goal line, and then something happens. Like, tell me about a time where that's happened to you, but like how you saved it.
The physical security is a really good part of it, right? Like, we got one phone call where they wanted to put cameras in place, and it was like, okay, that's fine. And it's like, do you just want security, or, what are you really looking for? Are you just looking for off hours monitoring? Are you looking for, what are you looking for? And then one facility was just looking for basic, they've had a few thefts here and there, and
sure.
It's a big facility. They have a large yard outside, a lot of equipment. They've had some theft, and it's like, okay, that's that. And they were like, okay, that's what we want for everybody. It's like, okay, fine. Then you start talking to them, and, another plant manager comes in and he's like, well, this isn't going to solve my problem. It's like, well, what's your problem? He's like, well, they had a lot of workman's comp claims. And he's like, well, just because I have a camera, it's not really going to help me. Like, I don't want to go with the solution. Luckily, we have a good partner in the channel that's got a really good AI platform that they can put on top, and they can look at things like body position. They can look at you can put rules in there to where, if Zach is lifting incorrectly, it can actually send an alert to, the shop foreman and say, like, hey, go talk to Zach right now because he's lifting improperly. He's going to hurt his back. Right.
Wow.
And they're like, and, you get to, it's like, hey, Zach, like, you got to lift with your legs. You can't be lifting. Oh, I didn't do that. It's like, no, it's here on video, man. Like, we're trying to help you. We're trying to keep you safe. Wow. And, so it's those kinds of things, right? So that was one where, that one could have come off the rails, but luckily we had enough where it's like, oh no, we can layer this on top. We can do this. And he was like, oh, this is great. This will really help me out. And then from then we had those two, and then it went to the rest of them, right? Then it was, that's, if you can get one win within a company, it spreads pretty rapidly. Right. Especially when you have those kinds of things where you have different people that make different decisions in parts of the business, or you have large enterprises that have different divisions. Right. So you may have a manufacturing division that does industrial equipment, but at the same time, and maybe they're in automotive over here, but they're in aerospace over here. Again, if you can get one win over here, they're like, hey, you should really talk to ClearSync because they helped us out with this. And then, little by little, you can start to kind of expand your reach into there.
So with, when things go south like that, when you're working with a customer, I mean, obviously there's no way to just mitigate that completely, but like, what's your advice, to other technology consultancy companies? Like, is it just like having more suppliers? Is it having more partnerships? Like how do you mitigate those as much as possible, those situations?
I think one is, always be learning, because there's so many, there's so many providers that are within the channel. Right. And so many of them, it's very hard to, again, people used to be very, and it was, and especially now that the channel has continued to expand. Traditionally when the channel first started, it was really focused on network, and then that kind of jumped into like CCAS stuff, and there were those kinds of things. But there are so many people that are in the channel now that have so many great solutions, and it's really just educating yourself and staying connected with different channel managers on what they're developing. I always ask people like, hey, what are you guys working on? Like, I know what you offer today, but like, what's in the pipeline for the next, 12 to 18 months? Because, if there's something that's out there, you can find companies that are very ready to be the guinea pig for something, especially smaller companies, right? If you have a CEO that's very much into not being a guinea pig, but they're more of a technology, they're one of the early adopters, and you can partner with them. It's really good to be able to go to a supplier and say like, hey, I have somebody, like if I know this is in your R&D and you're ready to kind of sort of start testing this out and launching this, you may be able to work out a deal with one of your customers where they do it at a discount, or they do it for free, or they get some free seats or whatever. And it gives the supplier valuable feedback. But then at the same time, if it works for the company, now they're really happy about it because they know they're at the forefront of this technology that their competitors don't have, right? So, I mean, my advice is, talk to everybody, continually talk to suppliers, try and understand what they're working on, talk to their engineers, because nobody really talks to the engineers until it's time to implement something, right? But a lot of those guys are knee deep into what they're working on, what the next phase of their technology is. And, as much as I try and learn as much as that, because if I'm in a meeting and it's like, oh, somebody needs this, it's like, okay, like the more the more I know where I can connect the dots and be like, okay,
Right.
like they may not have everything, but I can have them partner with this other supplier, and this can give the overall solution, right? Because nobody out there has everything. So
That's true.
again, being able to put people together and at the end of the day come up with a solution that works for everybody. I think that, and I would say the other thing too is, again, do as much homework as you can at the very beginning. Again, just understanding their business, where they want to go, who the stakeholders are, who the influences are, within a company. Because, I've run into a lot of situations where, the biggest influencer may not have that title of director or CFO or whatever, but there's somebody that they rely on to say like, hey, is this, is this real? Is this something that we can really look at? And so if you can find those influencers within companies, that's huge.
Sure. I forgot to ask you earlier, so we're going to kind of switch gears for 1 second, but we were talking about CX, UX, security, all that stuff, AI. Obviously, those are huge topics, but I wanted to ask you, what are some trends besides those things that you have been seeing that don't get as much attention as you would expect?
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones that are on the tip of everybody's tongue, right? Because they're, again, I was like, IT is one of those things where, people think they know a lot more than they really know, right? So they're like, oh, like I connected my home network and, oh, I know all about networks. It's like, no, you don't, right? Or if they read something in a magazine or they read an article, it's like, oh, that's the next thing we should go after. And, it's just, education is the biggest thing that you can do. And right now, all of those things are, you can't go to, you can't pick up a newspaper, a magazine, watch a news program without all those things bombarding you right now, right? So, again, those things are sexy and those things are out there. But, I always tell people at the end of the day, it's your fundamental processes are the backbone of your business. And, you may want that AI step, but you may not be there. And again, that's where you really have to dig into their business and understand completely where they're at with, from a business perspective, but also that tech stack perspective, because they may want to go here, but they've only got tools that'll support here. And it's like,
Right.
okay, like we can get there and I'll give you the roadmap to get there, but understand that you're here right now and this is what it's going to take.
Right.
And just having that conversation, because a lot of times they just don't realize it. And it's like, okay, we do have to take baby steps to that. But incrementally, just because you can't implement this today, it doesn't mean that these other 2 or 3 steps are going to they're going to really help your business along the way. Right. So It's just keeping that in mind and making sure that you're building that foundation correctly. Because I've seen a lot of companies that, and the most frustrating thing for those business leaders is, and I'm sure you've run into it too, where it's a hard sell because they've had a bad experience where they spent millions of dollars on a certain technology and it didn't work out and nobody uses it. And they're like, oh, why am I going to go spend this money again? Right. This seems like another waste of money. And it's like, okay, well, okay, what is that? Because I've gone into a lot of places too where, a big thing is CRMs, right? Like
Sure.
I've run into so many instances where people are like, well, I spend all this money in a CRM and my salespeople don't even use it. And it's like, so I don't want to go spend money on this. It's like, well, why don't they use it? And a lot of times it's pretty simple, right? Maybe it's, something as basic as they don't have single sign-on. Right. And so the salesperson gets frustrated because now I've got to log into this separately every time I have to go put in, a new lead or follow up on this So the technology works. It's not that it doesn't work. It was just maybe implemented incorrectly, or we can put different things in to make it easier for the user at the end of the day. Right. And that's the thing too. Internally, it's understanding what everybody's goals are, right? Because you may have some IT people and their objective is like, I just have to get this implemented. It's like, okay, you achieved yours, but they're not achieving theirs on the sales side because they're not using it, right? And now it just frustrates the entire company. So making sure that everybody's aligned on what that end goal is, is key as well.
Speaking of not using things, one thing that I've been thinking about a ton and doing some research on is partner portals. So like Evolve IP, we have we have a partner portal, right? Where partners can go in and look at assets and your register opportunities and stuff like that. And I would venture to say that partners spend more time, and this isn't just my opinion, this is just the research that I've done, but they spend more time on the TSD portals, right? So what's your opinion on partner portals? Like, give me some advice. I'm the marketing guy. I've got to make the decision on whether we keep it or lose it. Like, where should I put my resources? Is it more on, which I manage the TSD portals anyway, but sure. Like, are partner portals even worth it? Are partners even using those anymore? Like, they were big, they were big a while ago, right?
Yeah, they were big. I think the thing now is, and especially if you look at TSDs, they're, and this is really taken off, and I don't care which TSD you use, but they're really, again, historically, my competitors, again, they were focused on network. They were an SD-WAN player. They were a CCAS player, a UCAS player. And if you look at all the TSDs for the last 2 years, everything that they push in every one of their conferences when they bring people in is like, expand your business, right? Like, if you already have a client base, if you're SD-WAN focused or if you're CCAS focused, you already have an existing customer base that knows you, that trusts you because you've implemented these solutions for them, but they need cybersecurity. They need, they need AI. They need other facets that are offered in the channel. And their whole push is like, diversify yourself, be able to learn and be able to sell other solutions rather than just what you focused on for the last 10, 15 years. Right. And so I think as people start to buy into that, the problem with the partner portals is, if they were only dealing with 2 or 3 partner portals before, and now they're trying to diversify, now they could be dealing with like 10 or 15 partner portals. And that becomes very cumbersome, right? To be able to log into everything, do this, do that. So, and I think that's where, I can speak for us. I mean, going into a TSD portal, if I have everything on your partner portal, whether it's, your battle cards, your one-sheeters, all your, your presentations, all those kinds of, if I can get it from one source, that saves me so much time. I mean, it's a game changer for me, and I prefer to do that. And it's not that I love the information. It's just I don't want to have to go to 10 different places if I'm trying to put something together. Because again, at least for us, like I said, that's what we went into it at the beginning. Is we want to be a one-stop shop for people. We want to be the advisor that they come to for everything. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's where, we don't have the technical stuff, but that's where we can lean on your engineers, TSD engineers, to be able to come in and bring in and say, okay, like, I know enough to get in here. Now I need you to help me, finish closing that deal and speak from this technical side of it or whatever the case may be. So yeah, again, being able to be that one-stop shop. I don't necessarily have to want to go to 10 partner portals to pull all the information I need.
Sounds about right.
That's tough to hear, because I've had this conversation with a number of people, and and I know that, again, I know there's a lot of money that's gone into those partner portals over the years.
Oh yeah. Well, and that surprised me too, with how expensive they were and stuff like that. And, I think, and that's just the evolution, right? I mean, we talk about how much technology changes, but like, what people need and what they want changes too. And if you don't listen to that, it's just, it's just like customer feedback. If you're not listening to customer feedback, then what are you doing? Right. So, and that's one of the reasons.
Yeah. I think just look at it from the technology that you're selling, right? Like if you're a CCaaS, vendor, supplier, for example, and you have a partner portal, you're pushing to, your clients are coming to you for things like omnichannel, right? Because their customers, whether it's chat, whether it's through Twitter, whether it's through any other social media, whether it's through email or text, like you're selling them solutions to make their customer be able to do business in a way that they want to do business with you. And you're putting it into to put that ease of use in. Apply that to your business as well, right? Because you've got agents and everybody else telling you the same thing. I want to be able to do business with you the way I want to, right? And that, you may have some that love the partner portals, but you have a lot more now that are on the go. And it's like, hey, if I can just shoot a text, or if I can just go on the TSD, portal and have everything I need, for example. So it's just again, figuring out and making it easier for somebody to do business with you. Yeah.
And not being offended that, just like you said, like they want to do the business how they want to do it. Like that's just, it's the same thing as the customers. Like the customers evolve and change and want certain things, and then they don't want certain things, and like that's okay.
Times change, right? Like
we're not in the feelings business, right?
Right. I mean, times change, right? Like think about how people book flights now, for example. Back in our parents' day, they used to call a travel agent, right? I mean,
that's right.
Now, and then it went to, okay, I'm going to call directly to the airline. And then it went to, when the internet came, it's like, oh, now I can go on a website. Now everybody wants it on an app, or they want to be able just to book it through text, or they want to be able to, however it is. But I mean, just evolution, technology changes, and that evolution goes through, and it's the same thing for suppliers and TSDs as well.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, I know we're coming up on time here, but I wanted to ask you one more thing. So like when you go into a TSD portal and you're looking for, a specific solution or whatever, like what sort of, and this is more for me, I'm being selfish, but what sort of like asset or something or battle card, what's the first thing that you look for from a supplier? Like what's your go-to like document to see what they have? Is it assets? Is it video? Is it like, what's your opinion?
Yeah, that's hard because again, I have to go based on my customer, right? And even
True.
Then, like I've got C-suite clients who are very old school, and they don't want death by PowerPoint, but they at least want to be able to say like, oh, I have a deck, right? Like I have a deck that I can refer back to. I don't want you to read off of it, but at least I have this that I can refer back to. So I have to have that. I've got, I may have, IT directors that are looking at, 4 different solutions, and they're just looking for the differences. And all I need is a battle card. And it's like, here's the key differences, and here's exactly what you're looking for that checks all the boxes, right? I may have marketing people that love videos. And it's like, okay, if I can send them a video and it explains everything to them and shows them what it is, they love it, right? So
Guilty.
I wouldn't say that. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that there's one go-to for me. It really depends on the client. It depends who I'm talking to, and I just really finding out how they digest information the best and how they can process it to come to a decision.
Makes sense. Okay, so I've got 2 more. Where do you see the channel 5 years from now?
I think it's going to be very different from a number of perspectives. Well, I think it's a few things. I think one, and you can frame it in so many different ways. So from a TSD perspective, you've obviously seen a lot of consolidation, within these last 12 months, right? And that continues to be happening. It's funny, like I've worked with private equity for a long time, because of oil and gas in my previous history. Private equity money came in, within the last, call it 24 months into this industry. And a lot of people a lot of people, they get scared and there's a bad feeling on it. And, private equity is not bad. They have a lot of resources. They have a lot of knowledge. They have a lot of things that they can do to help you grow their business. A lot of them have, they have a lot of portfolio companies that can instantly become customers of yours or potential customers of yours. So there's a lot of pluses to that. So I think from a TSD perspective, I think there's probably still a little bit more consolidation that happens. I think from a supplier side, there's definitely, I think in some sectors, there's definitely consolidation that needs to happen, and that's just going to happen naturally. Sure. And I think that's where, again, you just have to stay on top of, understanding, where it's going. You can't just kind of keep your head in the sand and hope that it's not going to come, because it's going to come, right? And the further ahead you stay away and stay educated on what's going on in the world and kind of that macro view of it, I think you'll be better prepared as things happen, right? And you've got to be able to talk to your suppliers and to your TSDs that when these consolidations do happen, if you see them coming down, it's like being able to have that conversation of, how does this affect me? How does this, how can I continue to work with you better? Are there things that are there features that are going to fall off? Are there things that are going to change? Because those things are very important, right? And I think also too that I think there's a lot of the suppliers in a way too need to be proactive in their communication with everybody and what their plans are and how they see themselves growing or what the case may be, right? Because I think the more honest and transparent you are, everybody's willing to continue to work with you and they want to grow with you. They just don't want to be left in the dark.
Sure. That makes sense. That's good insight. I think, yeah, I mean, private equity coming in, consolidations, that's, it will certainly be interesting to see what the future holds. But anyway, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a good one. It's flown by. Before we get out of here, I just had, I wanted to know what your experience has been working with us, Evolve IP. I know we've done obviously some projects together. So what's that been like for you?
It's been really good. I have no complaints. Great, really great engineers, always willing to help, willing to jump on and help clients. The technology is great, but obviously it always comes down to the implementation and the support after. And I've had a number of bad experiences in other, with other suppliers, but Evolve has been, I consider Evolve a true partner. I mean, when it comes to clients that want to talk about desktop or UC stuff, I mean, Evolve I always look to see, number one, if Evolve is going to be that fit for them, because I know that the support is going to be there for them at the end of the day. And I know the implementations are really going to go great.
Well, I love to hear that. Thanks so much. So tell everybody how they can learn more about ClearSync.
It's our website is csync.com. We're relaunching that website with the rebrand. So if everybody goes to it, it's actually launching this weekend. So there's a landing page on it now, but the full website will be launched this weekend. They can go there. We have a large LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn. We do a lot there. It's been a great avenue for us, and just go support our posts, go like it, and share them where they're relevant to you.
Excellent. All right, Richard Rodriguez, thanks so much. Thanks everybody for watching. Talk to you guys later.
Appreciate it.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Channel Champions podcast. You can find this and all our episodes on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite streaming platforms. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, guests, or topics, please reach out to us. We appreciate you coming along with us on this journey and hope you'll be back for the next episode. Until then, stay tuned, stay connected, and stay inspired.